Mother. The first word many of us learn as a kid, which also symbolizes the first person that loves us unconditionally, in most cases. So what happens when you're born without that right as a child? Some go on about life with issues, just like the rest of us, and others, well, simmer with resentment at a parental figure they were never able to have. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the main antagonist of Silent Hill 4, Walter Sullivan, and how the obsession of a parental figure he never had but always wanted becomes grounds for murder. So first, let's start off with the background of Walter, then his impact in Silent Hill 4, and followed by my own personal analysis of him. 34 years before the event of Silent Hill 4 in 1967, Walter Sullivan was found in room 302 of South Ashfield Heights in the city of Ashfield by a man named Frank Sunderland. While not much information is known about his parents, we do know that they had their own issues. Issues big enough to warrant abandoning their son in their apartment with his umbilical cord. Walter was given to the St. Jerome Hospital, which may have been where Mary Sunderland in Silent Hill 2 was being treated, and eventually ended up in the Wish House orphanage in a forest close to Silent Hill. Unfortunately for this young child, the cult ran the Wish House, and from there, his life would take a tragic turn for the worst. As Walter grew up in the Wish House, he was subjected to physical abuse as well as being forced to read the Order's scriptures, essentially being brainwashed to believe that the outside world is a true place of horror. When Walter was 6 years old, he crossed paths with Dahlia Gillespie, the one and only, of course. She told him that his mother was asleep in room 302 in South Ashfield Heights, and if he was a good boy by memorizing the 21 sacraments for the descent, that he could one day meet her. Walter ended up taking this notion incorrectly, though. He did not believe his mother lived in room 302, but that she actually was room 302 in itself.
Yeah, but I never met him. They left South Ashfield Heights right after I was born. But soon I'll get to see my mom.
Do you know where she is now?
Yeah, of course. Right where I was born. Lots of people tried to stop me, but it's fine now. It says in the scriptures that I'll be with her. I gotta hurry. Mom's waiting.
It is stated that once a week Walter from then on would travel to Ashfield Heights and stalk the door of 302 as he was unable to enter due to tenants occupying that space. Tenants around the area would notice Walter's odd behavior and would treat him harshly because of it. One guy in particular, named Richard Braintree, made a lasting impression on Walter. During this time with the Order, a man by the name of George Rothstein raised Walter in the 21 Sacrament ritual where he allowed Valtiel into Walter's subconscious, which led to Walter receiving supernatural powers and being nicknamed the Red Devil. While he may have gotten Valtiel in his subconscious, I suspect that because of Walter's upbringing, combined with what little we know of his parents, he was already at a disadvantage psychologically speaking. Fast forward a couple years, and Walter ended up homeless and perhaps panhandled just to survive as he slept in train stations and on streets. In one encounter, a girl by the name of Eileen Galvin approaches Walter and gives him her doll to sleep with. Another encounter was with Cynthia Velasquez in the South Ashfield station, in which she commented to her friends that Walter was filthy yet handsome. As the years progressed, Walter began focusing more on the 21 sacraments due to the teachings of the Order that was forced upon him as a child. While searching for meaning in his life, he came across a teaching titled Descent of the Holy Mother, the 21 Sacraments. It is in this track that Walter started to believe if he followed it, he could awaken his mother in room 302, and her love would protect him from the evils of the world that he faced up until this point. As Walter grew older, his hate for the world also grew. In turn, this strengthened his desire for the motherly figure he never had. Walter, at the age of 24, began his 21 Sacrament mission to revive his mother in room 302. Within 10 days, Walter had killed 10 people. He had also removed their hearts and even carved their sacrificial number onto their bodies. This was then known as the Walter Sullivan case. But what is really unique about this case was how Walter would carve his own name into the flesh of his victims, almost as if he wanted to be caught. In accordance with a death report from Silent Hill 2, it is stated that Walter was captured and convicted of his crimes, but ended up killing himself during his incarceration. A man by the name of Joseph Schreiber, who lived in room 302 at the time, stated in his red diary that the report was false because that wasn't the real Walter that killed himself. The fake Walter had stated, "He's trying to kill me. He's trying to punish me. The monster. The Red Devil. Forgive me. I did it. But it wasn't me." Which is implying that Walter was possessed to do these crimes and it wasn't of his own free will. What's odd about this statement is, regardless if it was truly Walter or not, it seems to apply some empathy or awareness in his actions, which is never shown anywhere else in adult Walter's actions throughout the game. What's curious about this event, though, is days later residents of South Ashfield Heights said to have witnessed a long-haired man with a coat in the apartment building. Joseph Schreiber believed that the real Walter was still alive, and soon after his apartment in room 302 was infiltrated by Walter himself. Walter performed the ritual of the Holy Assumption, releasing himself from the bonds of flesh to gain the power of heaven. While doing this, he also became the 11th sacrament himself. Joseph discovers Walter's crucified corpse, and instead of saying, "I must leave this apartment immediately because there's a corpse in here," he seals it off. The game never clarifies if due to this ritual Joseph himself became trapped in room 302 or not, but regardless, he sections that portion of his apartment off from the rest of it. 3 years later, the ritual killings for the 21 Sacraments picks up once again. Another 4 years after that, the events of Silent Hill 4, The Room, finally begin. While there are a lot of names mentioned, many of them play a key part in the story, as their past interactions with Walter also solidify their present ones, as the people he encountered would also become part of the 21 Sacraments. It is not until round 3 do we encounter the remainder of the 21 Sacraments. The first of round 3 is Cynthia, followed by Jasper Gain.
I finally met him.
After that is Andrew DeSalvo. And of course, Richard Braintree. Putting Walter's total kills up to 19 at this point in time. Eileen and Henry were meant to be the final 2 victims to fulfill the 21 Sacraments, but depending on the player's choices in the game, this ending of course can be a happy or tragic one. All throughout these events during The Room, though, Henry encounters both young and adult Walter. Young Walter is seen in the forest world, the water prison, and the building world. In the apartment world, he also has a conversation with adult Walter and learns of his first encounter with Eileen when he was younger.
I got this from Miss Galvin. A long, long time ago. She was younger than me back then. She looked so happy, holding her mother's hand. Here, I'll give it to you.
Soon after, Walter assaults Eileen, but his younger counterpart interferes. So at this point, it's safe to assume that young Walter seems to represent a part of Walter that is pure or void of corruption. We have learned that the world was cruel to Walter, and in return he was cruel to the world. But young Walter is that small portion of him, similarly to Cheryl from Alessa, that represents a part of him that the world destroyed. I find it very interesting how both Alessa and Walter separate parts of themselves to essentially survive. They compartmentalize the good within them to protect the bad from corrupting it. We also learn more so of Walter's past, such as several hanging bodies implied to symbolize Walter's father, or his own personal representation of his father, as these bodies say that Walter should have never been born, or that he is a stupid little crybaby. After Henry's discovery of Walter's past via his umbilical cord that was found with him many years ago by Frank Sunderland, we are eventually led to the core of room 302. This is where adult Walter, young Walter, and Eileen all are. By saving Eileen, the 21 Sacraments is never completed, and young Walter disappears as if part of him can finally rest. If the player fails to have kept Eileen free from the curse, however, the 21 Sacrament endings show that Walter is still alive, but motionless in room 302. He, however, is very content that in the end, he truly got what he wanted. So as we can see here, Walter, as the game progresses, becomes more and more of a prominent figure. Henry ends up visiting the same places Walter had at some point in time, providing us, as a player, context as to where Walter has been and what he has done. This makes sense, as the whole reason why Henry can't leave room 302 is because of Walter. Taking a look at Walter's name, by the way, shows more insight into this monster. His first name, Walter, is of German origin and means commander of the army. This should not be taken literally, as we know Walter works alone, but from his actions it can definitely be said that he is the commander of his one-man army, as not even death seems to stop him from his goals. His last name, Sullivan, is of Gaelic origin and means one-eyed or dark-eyed according to where you look it up at. In some iterations it is also known as hawk-eyed, meaning a person who has very keen sight. I find this also to be very fitting for Walter, as he had to keep tabs on the people that he met throughout his life in order to do as many killings as he did. While the world was cruel and cold to him, he too was looking back at the world, calculating his future steps. Walter as an antagonist is a very interesting individual. One side we see young Walter, who displays innocence and is just a boy searching for a way to meet his mother. On the other side, we encounter adult Walter, who sees the world through a skewed lens and is only motivated by his own desires. This distinct duality is what makes Walter different than Alessa in my eyes. Alessa, while damaged by the world around her, still managed to separate the good within her and herself into separate entities. But even though Cheryl exists, Alessa still kept part of what made her human intact. Though her negative feelings exist, they seem to be within reason or limited to a certain degree. By limited, I mean in the context of Walter, Alessa's action seems much more controlled and reasonable. Walter, on the other hand, took the pain that the world brought onto him and reflected it outwards. He shows no remorse or regret in his actions. He is a man willing to do anything to anyone in order to achieve his own goals, which highly leads me to believe that Walter, at the very least, shows psychopathic tendencies. Most of his killings involved men, but we see not only with Miriam Locane, who is victim number 10, but also Cynthia and Eileen, how visceral Walter's feelings towards women truly are. This no doubt stemmed from his love and hate relationship for a mother he never had. In some ways, I do honor Walter's drive to do what he has to in order to achieve his goals, but obviously serial killing is not part of that honor. While I do not believe he took pleasure in his killings, it goes to show that you shouldn't leave your child in an abandoned apartment room, because chances are they will not grow up to leave a positive impact on the world. In some ways, I definitely do feel sorry for Walter, but at the same time, I cannot ignore the actions he has taken for his own benefit. Walter, without a doubt, is a very special villain in the Silent Hill series. He is not some creature or manifestation. He is human, or was human, at one point in time. But these are my thoughts on Walter Sullivan. Feel free to leave yours in the comments below. I really appreciate you stopping by and listening. Consider subscribing if you want to, and regardless if you choose to or not. I hope to see you in the next one.